Imagine if I told you that almost everything you think you understand, you probably don't. Not because you're not smart, but because your brain is really good at creating the illusion of understanding. You read something, you nod your head, you feel confident, and then the moment someone asks you to explain it, your mind goes blank. That uncomfortable silence, that's where real learning begins. Today, I'm going to share a simple but powerful way to learn faster, remember longer, and actually understand anything you study. This idea comes from one of the greatest thinkers of all time, Richard Feynman, and by the end of this video, you'll see learning in a completely different way. Before we go deeper, if you enjoy content that helps you think more clearly, learn deeply, and see science and life with curiosity, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Think in Physics. It really helps the channel grow, and it tells YouTube that this kind of content matters. Now let's get into something that can genuinely change the way you learn forever. Richard Feynman wasn't just a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. He was known as the Great Explainer. What made him special wasn't only his intelligence, but his ability to take extremely complex ideas and explain them in such a simple way that almost anyone could understand. And the secret behind this ability was not talent or genius. It was a method, a mindset, a way of thinking that forces your brain to stop pretending and start learning for real. Most people learn passively. They read books, watch lectures, highlight text, and reread notes again and again. It feels productive, but it's mostly an illusion. Your brain recognizes the words, so it feels familiar, and familiarity feels like understanding. But familiarity is not mastery. Feynman believed that if you can't explain something simply, you don't truly understand it. And that idea is the heart of this technique. The first step is simple but uncomfortable. Choose a concept you want to learn, and then try to explain it as if you were teaching it to a child. Not a smart adult, not a student in your class. A child, someone with no background knowledge. This forces your brain to strip away fancy words and memorize definitions. When you do this, something interesting happens. You start to notice gaps. You realize where your explanation becomes vague, confusing, or completely falls apart. And those weak points are gold. They show you exactly where your understanding is shallow. At this moment, many people stop. The discomfort feels like failure. But Feynman saw it differently. He believed confusion is not a sign that you're bad at learning. Confusion is proof that learning is happening. When you find a gap, you go back to the source. You read again, watch again, or research again, but this time with a clear purpose. You're not just consuming information. You're fixing a specific weakness. As you return to the material, you simplify it in your own words. You avoid copying sentences. You avoid memorizing definitions. You translate the idea into language that feels natural to you. This step is powerful because your brain remembers what it creates, not what it copies. When you explain something in your own words, you're actively building knowledge instead of borrowing it. Then you repeat the process. You explain again. You notice new gaps. You go back, you simplify again. Each loop makes your understanding deeper and stronger. Over time, what once felt complex starts to feel obvious. And that's when you know real learning has happened. What makes this technique so effective is that it fights your brain's biggest enemy, overconfidence. We often think we understand things just because we've heard them many times. Feynman hated this kind of false confidence. He believed that saying, "I know," without being able to explain was dangerous, not only in science but in life. When you force yourself to explain, you expose your own thinking. There's nowhere to hide. This is why the Feynman technique works for almost anything. Physics, math, programming, history, psychology, even skills like communication or business. The subject doesn't matter. The process stays the same. Explain it simply. Find the gaps. Fix them, repeat. Let's talk about why this helps you learn faster. When you explain something, you're using active recall. Your brain is working to pull information out, not just push information in. This strengthens memory pathways. It also connects ideas together instead of keeping them isolated. That's why people who teach often understand topics better than people who only study. Another reason this works is emotional. When you finally explain something clearly, you feel a small win. That feeling motivates you to keep going. Learning stops feeling like a chore and starts feeling like a puzzle. And puzzles are addictive. Feynman also believed strongly in curiosity. He didn't learn to impress others. He learned because he genuinely wanted to understand how the world works. When you use this technique, you naturally become more curious. You start asking better questions. Why does this work? What happens if this changes? How does this connect to something else? These questions deepen understanding even more. Now here's an important detail most people miss. The goal is not to sound smart. The goal is clarity. If your explanation sounds simple, even obvious, that's a good sign. Many people hide behind complex language because it protects their ego. Simple language exposes weak thinking. Feynman had no patience for that. He cared about truth, not appearances. You can use this technique alone or with others. You can write your explanation on paper. You can record yourself speaking. You can pretend you're teaching an invisible student. You can even explain it to a real person. The format doesn't matter. What matters is honesty. If something doesn't make sense, don't skip it. Don't say, "I'll understand it later." That later rarely comes unless you face the confusion now. This approach also changes how you watch videos and read books. Instead of passively consuming, you start asking, "Can I explain this?" If the answer is no, you pause and think. You engage. Learning becomes active, not passive. At Think in Physics, the goal is not just to share information, but to help you think, to question, to simplify, and to truly understand. The Feynman technique fits perfectly with that philosophy. It reminds us that real intelligence is not about knowing many words or facts. It's about seeing things clearly. As you practice this method, you'll notice something surprising. Your confidence will increase, but it will be a quiet confidence, not the loud kind that comes from pretending. The calm kind that comes from knowing you can break down any problem and understand it step by step. That confidence transfers to everything. Exams, conversations, work with life decisions. Of course, this technique takes effort. It's easier to rewatch a video than to explain it. It's easier to highlight text than to struggle with confusion. But easy doesn't lead to mastery. Struggle does. Feynman understood that deeply. If you've ever felt frustrated because you study hard but forget quickly, this method can help. If you've ever felt like others learn faster than you, this method can help. Learning is not about speed, it's about depth. And depth comes from understanding, not repetition. As we get closer to the end, I want you to try something small today. Pick one idea you recently learned, just one. Sit down and explain it out loud in simple words. Notice where you hesitate. Notice where you feel unsure. That's your roadmap. That's where your next level of learning is hiding. If this video helped you see learning differently, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what topic you want to try the Feynman technique on. And if you think this could help a friend who struggles with studying or understanding complex ideas, share this video with them. Sometimes one simple idea can change how someone learns for the rest of their life. Thank you for spending your time here, thinking deeply with Think in Physics. Keep questioning, keep simplifying, and never be afraid to say, "I don't understand yet." That yet is where growth begins.